Thanks so much for joining us. We really do appreciate your viewership here at the Catholic View for Women. I'm Teresa Tomeo, where we bring you news and views from a truly Catholic perspective. We have Astrid Bennett Gutierrez from the Vita Institute, or Initiative, thank you very much, and Janet Morana from Priests for Life, Defending Life here in EWTN, and the Silent No More Awareness Campaign. Another reminder, as our last episode, we talked about the victims of the sexual revolution. We're going to be talking about now healing the wounds of the sexual revolution. So just be advised that we are letting you know ahead of time that this is mature content. So viewer discretion is advised for this episode as well. Ladies, as we were discussing in the last episode, there's always a price to pay when we defy human nature. And the sexual revolution really set our culture on a collision course with true happiness in fulfillment. And we're seeing that over and over and over again. But there is help available. And the first place we can go to, of course, is to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ in a relationship with Him in the Catholic Church.
That's right. And in particular, you know, in this year of mercy, you know, that the Holy Father's declared, it's so appropriate because the mercy is there just for us to be open to want to come to it. And like, for example, let's talk about abortion with the Silent No More Awareness Campaign. The men and women who've been hurt, again, because of the sexual revolution, they get pregnant, and it makes it sound, society's telling you it's an easy out, have an abortion, go back to school and work tomorrow, no big deal. We see the fallout. And programs like Rachel's Vineyard, which is part of Ministry of Priests for Life, the largest retreat program for healing after abortion, where all over the world. So many people have been helped through that program. And of course, that's just one of a whole host of healing programs, which if they go to a special webpage we have, abortionforgiveness.com, you can put in your zip code, Teresa and Astrid, you can just find where's the nearest Rachel's Vineyard or other healing programs for abortion healing in your area.
Yes, and part of healing too, and part of mercy is teaching the truth in love. And how liberating is it for many people when they've gone through this, unfortunately, but then they realize that the truth was always in the Catholic Church, you know. And you see how Humanae Vitae, you know, was published in the 60s, Pope Paul VI, Saint Pope Paul VI, and basically people rejected it. Many people rejected it. They were in the middle of the sexual revolution. Everybody thought they had found, you know, the most wonderful thing and the liberating thing. And here the church was, like it always has, proclaiming the truth, the liberating truth. And, you know, and Pope Paul VI made some prophetic, you know, statements about what the contraceptive mentality would unleash upon women who it was supposed to liberate. So now we have this fallout, but the church now always offer the truth, and also now healing for these victims. Of course, confession, but now many apostolates directly healing those wounds.
And of course, Teresa and I have both in our testimonies were victims of the sexual revolution in that we contraceptive, because it was out there, just everyone was doing it. I can remember, you know, when I was doing marriage prep, the doctor even practically wrote me the prescription and put it in my hand at the time, because it was just a given that you were going to, you know, be on the pill, and then when you were ready, you could have your children. And of course, it was years later that I faced the feelings of, I knew I had lost children from the contraceptives. And I actually went through a Rachel's Vineyard retreat weekend to deal with it and to come to grips with it. And actually, I didn't even know that was going to happen. I was actually leading the retreat with other people there, thinking I was helping these other people having an abortion. And then the Lord really put it upon my heart that, wait a minute, Janet, you lost children through contraception.
Wow.
Yeah, through the pill. And I actually named the children and everything. And it was a real awakening for me. And then since then, I gave my testimony. And now on Rachel's Vineyard retreat weekends, they're finding more and more women, in addition to talking about the abortion, are talking about that grief from losing children through taking the pill.
Because they don't know that the IUD, the implant, these hormonal contraceptives could be allowing her to conceive, but the child she's not able to implant the child. So they might be losing children without knowing it. That's such
well, how many know that the pill is an
thought.
abortifacient? I mean, not many people know that either.
No, not either. And then, of course, like we've talked about this before in these shows, IVF, in vitro fertilization, people are not really thinking about the consequences of that now artificially you're creating children, and they're going to maybe have 5 implanted, and several will not take. And then the horrible thing that I did a whole chapter about this in my book, about selective reduction. Because now if too many children are successfully implanted in the womb, the doctors come back to them and say, well, now we're going to recommend a selective reduction because you've got 3 viable fetuses, they'll say in there, and really it's only healthy to keep maybe 1. And then they decide by location and sex and all these other things about which babies they will terminate. They don't use the word abortion. So this is another thing that we find people need healing from, because they get caught up in this world and they realize suddenly, oh my goodness, I had no idea that this was going to happen. And recently I was taking friends out to dinner and they were talking about a couple in their parish who had come to them and said, this happened to them. They didn't realize this. And then they said to the doctor, well, we won't selectively reduce. We won't do that. And the doctor was furious. You're putting yourself and these other babies at risk.
Incredible.
The whole medical community has been indoctrinated into this.
Exactly.
This
it's the
sexual
mindset.
revolution
It's the mindset. And that's what the sexual revolution has done, is created this mindset that needs healing. And there are so many people in all the different categories hurting. And then, like, for example, the people that are transgendered or go for sex change operations, there's websites now that say they regret doing this and they're looking for help. So it just can go on and on, all these different categories.
And ironically, a lot of people don't speak out about the truth of contraception, the truth of the hookup culture, the truth about abortion, because they're afraid to hurt people. Like, if I say this, it'll hurt people.
Or you're judging them.
Or you're judging them. But the reality is, truth and love liberates.
Yes.
Whenever I do a pro-life talk in the Hispanic community, I'm doing the presentation, and I will always have somebody come up and tell me, you know what, until I saw what really happens in abortion, now I can start to heal. Or I didn't know that this patch or this pill could cause abortions. What else can I do? We tell them about natural family planning.
Right.
So when you teach the truth and love, you're liberating people, and sometimes it's the beginning of their healing process.
That's right.
Do you think, and I wonder about this often, because so many people have been so indoctrinated into the culture, and maybe by even in some ways no fault of their own, that they just didn't, in a lot of cases, didn't even know better. I mean, maybe nowadays you can't say that because we're in the information age, but so many people have just simply accepted, as we did, hook, line, and sinker what the culture has sold them.
Right.
And they seem to just regurgitate the sound bites, women's reproductive health or pro-choice, it's all about freedom and blah, 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 without even thinking. It's like so many people have turned into robots.
Right.
So I wonder if many of them are caught in a situation where, well, I'm not happy, I should be happy because this is what the world is telling me, which makes me happy, but I'm miserable. But you know what I'm saying? It's this circle that they keep, vicious cycle that they keep going
like
through.
on a little treadmill,
right?
so to
Gerbil on
speak.
the treadmill.
Gerbil on a treadmill, because they don't realize that what's happened to them. I mean, I just know from my
the post-abortion women who say that they didn't know what happened to them until they had.
And so many of them will say some of their lines in their stories. Nobody told me. Nobody told me. Then they'll repeat over and over about the physical damage that would happen. I mean, so many of them, I can introduce you women who the only child they were ever able to conceive was a child they aborted. Many others lost multiple babies to miscarriage after their abortion. These are all the common things that happen. Nobody tells you that at the Planned Parenthood clinic, that this might happen to you after you had that abortion. And yet it's the reality, and it's a deep, deep wound and hurt that, so many of these women have married and wanted children, couldn't conceive them.
It's tragic.
It's tragic. But why? Because they bought the lies of the
sexual
culture.
revolution. Let's go to the clip of Dr. Jennifer Roback Morris, and you caught up with her again. This is part 2 of our interview. You caught up with her in Detroit for an interview, and let's see what Dr. Jennifer had to say about healing the wounds of the sexual revolution.
At the Ruth Institute, we've created a resource called Are You a Survivor of the Sexual Revolution? And we've come up with 12 different categories of survivors of the sexual revolution. It's almost overwhelming when you open this pamphlet and look at all these different people who have been wounded. And many people look at that and see themselves in several of the categories. So one category is the heartbroken career woman, which I put myself in that category. That's how I kind of got into all of this, as I realized that I had put so much of my effort into getting my doctorate and getting tenure at a major university and having my career. By the time I'm 35, I think, okay, I'm ready to have kids, and the kids won't come. It doesn't all happen the way you want it to. And many women are in that kind of situation where they've sacrificed everything to their career. Along the way, they've been contracepting. Along the way, they may have had one or more abortions. They may have participated in the hookup culture. They may have health problems due to the contraception that they've used, and so on and so forth. So a lot of people see themselves in multiple categories a lot of times. And what I know from experience is that you can go to confession, and it's a huge relief to find somebody who will listen. See, that's the first thing. The sexual revolution shuts down every complaint that we might have about what we did, and gee, it doesn't really feel right, and maybe I shouldn't have had the abortion. Maybe that's why I'm having night terrors all these years later, and maybe that's why I still have anniversary grief every year around the time the baby would have been born. And you have therapists telling you, no, that can't be it. That can't be related to any of it. No, you're just dismissed. So to find a Catholic priest who will hear your confession, oh man, it's huge to have that taken off of you. But once you've done that, you still have to deal with all the natural consequences of what you've done, which is you may have harmed people along the way. You may have married somebody who wasn't appropriate for you to be married to. You may have hurt the person you divorced. You may have hurt your kids. There may be all these kinds of wounds that you've left, it's wreckage that you've left behind you. It's very hard to face all that. It's devastating, actually, to face it. And so but you have to do it. The only way out of that is to go through it and to face up to it for what it is. And so we've developed a little resource called 7 Steps to Sexual Peace, which is also at the Ruth Institute website. And it's really a process, it's a very spiritual process of going through the process of facing reality of what you did, and then telling the truth about it to yourself, acknowledging that it wasn't all your fault because we were all lied to, we were all filled with all this crazy stuff. But at the same time, we have to take responsibility for our part in it. And so there's a whole process of making amends, of forgiving those who may have harmed us, and reaching out to others in hope and in peace. And it takes a while. And I would just like to say to everybody watching, if you're in this situation, give yourself the time that it takes, and understand that Jesus heals us and God forgives us just like that. But the natural consequences that we've created around us, those don't go away just like that. Our husbands or our past boyfriends or our kids, they're not necessarily going to forgive us right off the bat, And so it takes a while to go through that. We can go to them and say, I'm sorry for what I did. And they might look at us like, yeah, really? Are you sure? Like in a pig's eye, you're really sorry? They won't necessarily believe it. They'll be like, what is she trying to get? There's going to be suspicion, and it's not going to all flow so easily as it will in the confessional. But hang in there, because your healing is actually going to bring healing to a lot of other people. And so when you feel like it's not worth it for you, I want you to think about all the people around you who can be helped in a positive way by you going through this process. And that sometimes will give us the strength that we need to get over that hump.
And we'll have more on healing the wounds of the sexual revolution when we come back after the break. You're watching The Catholic View for Women. I'm Teresa Tomeo, along with Astrid Bennett Gutierrez and Janet Morana. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Catholic View for Women. I'm Teresa Tomeo, along with Astrid Bennett Gutierrez and Janet Morana. We're talking this time around about healing the wounds of the sexual revolution. And Dr. Jennifer Robeck-Morris had some great information for us, really.
And I had the privilege to attend a conference on healing the wounds of the sexual revolution with her. It felt more like a retreat, where she basically was doing talks on the different victims of sexual revolution, broken families, marriages, people who were conceived through donor, sperm donor and this kind of thing. And we were sitting there listening, and it was beautiful because she also took you through the process of healing and how you can begin to heal. And one of the big highlights for me was the issue of forgiveness and what is true forgiveness, what it is and how much of a gift it is. And it's a grace too. And within the conference, what was really neat is that she had each of us at the end of the conference, she said to us, there was probably a name that came up as you were listening to the talks. if you'd like, put that name on a piece of paper. And there's a beautiful cross up in the front, anonymously come up and put that name on the cross. And it was so beautiful to physically do this act of forgiveness to somebody that hurt you or that somebody you hurt, you know, in your life. So to go through that process, I think everybody can benefit from doing that.
It reminds me, it just popped into my head when I was coming home from a speaking engagement a few years ago. I was sitting next to a very nice man, and we got to talking, and he asked me what I did, and I told him, I said, well, I'm a Catholic talk show host, and I'm a speaker, and I said, it was right after Extreme Makeover came out, and I was telling him about my book, and he kind of looked away, and he was very sad, and he looked out the window as we were taking off, and he said, I used women. And I regret it. I mean, kind of out of the blue, he said this, and we started to have this conversation. He said, that's what, and he was in his 60s, and he said, that's what you did when I was growing up. That was the thing. Everybody was into it. We thought it was cool. This is the way we were going to be, you know, the sexual revolution. And here was this man who was obviously very successful, just striking up a conversation. And within 5 minutes, he's telling me that he regrets what he did.
Sure.
And he wishes he had the opportunity to ask for forgiveness from women. Imagine that.
I know, and what Jennifer said I think is so important is that, yes, we go to confession, and we find this, you know, with the women who've had abortions for selling and more. Yes, they go to confession, but then the harder thing is forgiving yourself.
And they know God forgives them, but they can't forgive themselves.
And then also forgiving the other people that were part of that decision. Okay, so it's a multifaceted thing. So in anything, it would be like, well, did the parents intervene to tell the girl you have to have the abortion or you get kicked out of the house? Or, you know, was it that the boyfriend pressured you or your husband pressured you to have that abortion? You have to forgive them. They have to forgive the doctor. And I've had women tell me too that they have to work with, like if they took contraceptive pills, they have to work with forgiving the doctor. Why did the doctor prescribe something that was so bad for me physically and of course morally, we know that, and spiritually. And so it is a process. And what Jennifer said is so true, because I know even for myself who took birth control pills like you, Teresa, for years, and yes, I came back to the church and I knew I was forgiven. But then I had to think back on my life like, okay, I chose to do this, but how easily I got swept up into this whole thing. And you have to think of all the different people that helped in that decision. And you have to work, that forgiveness of these others is a harder thing to work on. It really is. And it's only through prayer and the constant receiving, I think, of the sacraments and asking the Lord to help you forgive them and help you turn off that tape recorder in your head. Because I think that's the other problem we all have is that we keep replaying the scenes in our life where we made these mistakes. And at a certain point, you have to say, you know what? I have to put it at the foot of the cross, like you were saying that Jennifer does in one of those exercises. I have to put it at the foot of the cross and say, Lord, help me to really, truly forgive and help me reconcile with those who I've hurt, who I've hurt, and who have hurt me.
And because they're common, doesn't make it any less destructive. And they really are traumas. That's why it's hard to forget, because they're traumas, there's triggers. And the thing is about these wounds is that they give way to other things. And I've counseled women who are considering abortion for 15 years and post-abortive women as well. And one thing that I found in the Hispanic community, we haven't talked about this, is sexual abuse of young people, you know, of infant sexual abuse. And the thing is, a lot of women live with that pain. Many Hispanic women, we don't really know what the root of it is. Could be rooted in the machismo culture and the prevalence of pornography too. But a lot of women that are post-abortive, many of them have pointed back to the fact that they were abused as young girls, and then they kind of accept certain behaviors that later on lead to all of this woundedness. So to really put this out there to women, to let them know that they're beyond, you know, the wonderful grace of confession, that they really can seek therapy. They're not exaggerating. These are traumas. These are really, really big wounds. Not just because it's common does it make it any less serious.
And you know, in seeking therapy too, you know, Astrid, it's so important to find a good Christian or Catholic counselor. And one of the things we have on the Silent and More website, we have a special page called abortionforgiveness.com. When you put in the zip code, like I think I've said before, not only will you get Rachel's Vineyard, but you'll get the pregnancy centers that have healing programs, but you'll also get some of the counselors that are already taking a pledge that, yes, we counsel for abortion and these other sins, and that they recognize it, you know, in the spirit of, with the Lord involved and the faith. And so that's important too, because as we know, too many counselors don't recognize the fact that there's a problem of taking birth control pills, abortion, and all these other things we're talking about. They don't even recognize that. So therefore, what they want to do is hand you a prescription and put you on antidepressants and all these other things when they're not getting at the root cause of the problem.
That's it. And the wounds, as you said, they're so deep, and there's so many layers of the wounds. And then you multiply that by all the people who have been affected by the sexual revolution. It's mind-boggling.
That's right.
When you think about the fallout. It really is. You had an interesting case that you wanted to talk about from California.
That
That is really, I think.
Sadly, professors, like Dr. Morse, professors in the universities that are speaking out in defense of children, of marriage, especially natural marriage. One particular professor at Cal State Northridge, Dr. Robert Oscar Lopez, he is somebody who grew up with 2 moms. And so he talks about what that meant to him not to have a dad, how that affected him. So he speaks out and participates in conferences to defend children's rights to have a mom and dad, to have natural marriage and to defend natural marriage. And for that reason, he has been persecuted. Right now we've been, writing and trying to, put our support out there for him. But to let people know that, the world does not support our position, that we have to be vocal. When you're all saying how people don't know about the truth, I like to point the finger right back at myself and to say, how much am I speaking about these issues,
Right.
And what is it costing me? This professor, by him speaking out, it's costing him his tenure, possibly his job. So what is it costing me to defend the defenseless, the unborn, the defenseless children because of the so-called gay marriage decision? We have to do what a Christian is called to do, which is be courageous and bold.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And of course, another side effect of all that is now gay couples conceiving children through in vitro and then
Yes.
having the children. And again, recently I was giving people a ride and they talked about this 2 women, and one of them is going to be the mom, have the baby. And she conceived twins, and through IVF, of course. And unfortunately, the babies died. And now this was fast forward another year later. They went through the process again. Now, when you say went through the process, keep in mind that's a good $10,000 a clip every time they go through these IVF processes. And of course, she was, when I was giving them the raw, due to have that baby any day now. And all as I could think of, and they were chatting like this. These are practicing Catholics, okay, not the lesbian couple, but these other people. And they were chatting, oh yeah, and I sent her a baby shower gift, and I'm sitting there getting sick to my stomach. And finally, I just couldn't take it another minute. We stopped at a red light, and I said, excuse me, but do you understand what you're saying? Do you realize that how many other embryos died in the process for them to do this? And why couldn't they adopt a baby? But first of all, I don't agree with that the 2 lesbians should be doing that from the get-go. But I said, look at this. They are so swept up by the culture. They didn't even realize what they were talking about.
Right.
And then she said, oh, I didn't think about that. Oh,
That's
so
the problem.
they were
They don't
babies.
connect the dots.
Yes,
And
Hosea
it's-
4:6, my people
and it's
perish
all over
for lack of
TV.
knowledge.
I even watched the Food Network recently, and there was, a young kid on the, what they call the kid
Right.
cooking thing, and the kid says, oh
Chop
yeah.
Junior, yeah.
Yeah, Chop Junior. Oh, how did you get interested in cooking? Oh, my 2 mommies are both chefs, and I'm sitting there going, ugh.
And they chose them just
Specifically
for that reason.
reason.
Right.
Every show I've turned to, I try to go harmless things about, watch the house buying shows and stuff like that. And
They find a way to work it in there.
just about every other house buying couple they're showing is 2 men or 2 women buying houses together. I said, and this is why it's considered normal right now, and this is why it has crept into our culture, because every time you turn the dial, it's being pandered
Right.
as
We're being
this is normal.
indoctrinated into
and
it.
Then, it's indoctrination. It really is, Teresa.
Well, let's wrap up with just a reminder that there is healing in the church, and that God wants you to come to forgiveness if you are struggling with any of the wounds of the sexual revolution, to go to confession, as Dr. Roback Morse said, to go to confession, but also to remember to forgive yourself and to forgive others. And it's a process, and we don't go to confession just once. We go to confession, my spiritual director tells me, about once a month is a good time, and at least a good amount of time to go to confession. But we do have some resources for you to address this issue, and I'm going to turn it over to our teacher for our homework assignment.
Well, the first, like you just said, Teresa, prayer is the most important. We have on our website a beautiful prayer to the Archangel Raphael, Saint Raphael, who is the angel of healing. And I'd just like to quickly read this prayer. Blessed are you, O Lord, merciful God. Forever blessed and honored is your holy name. May all your works forever bless you. O Lord, may you be mindful of me and look with favor upon me. Send your holy Archangel Raphael to assist me as once you sent him to help Tobit and Sarah in answer to their prayers. Grant me healing in mind, body, and spirit. Cast away from me any evil forces that have come against your holy will in my life. I especially ask your mercy in this present need, so you name your intention. May my prayer come before your glorious presence and find favor. And I ask this in the holy name of Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord. Amen. And if that will be on our website. And of course, other items for homework, of course, are my book, which is available, Recall Abortion, at the Religious Catalog. And this, of course, has several chapters about the children made to order, the contraception, abortion, and so on, and why this is so damaging. And of course, we have Teresa's book, also available, Extreme Makeover, also in the EWTN Religious Catalog. These are great resources to help you really understand how this culture has damaged us and how we can all come to healing.
Yeah, well, I think in both these books, they're a real good tag team, I think, because we really go into the issues and we look at the culture and how the culture has indoctrinated people and really go into some of the details. And I go into a lot of the media messaging that has been done over the years, that it's really just brainwashed so many people, including you and I, for a while.
And of course, as Mother Angelica always said, keep those holy reminders around your home, available at the EWTN Religious Catalog. And of course, our patron is here, the Kitchen Madonna, who can adorn your kitchen like our kitchens. And we keep our eyes on Jesus.
That's right.
And that's
we
how
do.
we be healed.
The author and finisher of our faith. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of The Catholic View for Women. For our pastoral advisor, Father Frank Pavone, and for my co-hosts, Astrid and Janet, I'm Teresa Tomeo. We'll see you next time on The Catholic View for Women. God bless you.